Carrie Lam says further relaxation of social distancing measures will likely go ahead in the latter part of next month. 347 new COVID-19 cases in the city. And Russia's foreign minister says NATO risks starting a nuclear war by arming Ukraine.
Good evening and welcome. The chief executive said the government will press ahead with its plans to further relax social distancing measures next month, saying Hong Kong is on the path to resuming normalcy.
However, she added any relaxation on border controls or flight suspensions will not be considered. Christy Khan reports.
Speaking ahead of the Executive Council meeting, Chief Executive Carrie Lam told the press that the government will stick to its plan to implement the second phase of eased social distancing measures in May.
Unless there was a sudden surge in COVID-19 infection cases, but that looks quite unlikely based on our observations and the experts' advice because of the high level of hybrid immunity that Hong Kong has achieved.
Along with the eased measures, the government earlier announced that non-Hong Kong residents will be able to fly into Hong Kong starting from May as well. But the authorities are making no changes to border control and flight ban measures, citing they are necessary.
As far as border controls, these are still very important measures in order to reduce the importation of infected cases into Hong Kong, especially when many places are already removing their restrictions and social distancing measures, etc. So we still have this policy to prevent and reduce a large number of imported cases into Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, Lam also said 9 additional isolation hotels will be converted into quarantine hotels for inbound travelers in May. Around 3,000 rooms will be available for accommodating a possible surge of arrivals. Lam added some of the community isolation facilities will suspend operations, saying there are abundant facilities in the city to meet the current need. She added those suspended facilities will be on standby and will resume operation if Hong Kong experiences another wave of COVID-19. According to sources familiar with the matter, the facilities in Tsing Yi, Kai Tak, and Penny's Bay will remain in use. However, health experts said that the government should resume contact tracing and send COVID patients to some proper isolation facilities to minimize the transmission risk in the community. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The city has reported some 300 new COVID-19 cases, down from the more than 400 yesterday. 13
more students and teachers tested positive for COVID after about 600 schools resumed in-person classes yesterday. Caleb Leung has details.
Among the 347 new COVID infections reported today, 335 were locally transmitted cases. Among the local cases, 195 were identified through nucleic acid tests and 140 others through rapid antigen tests. There were also 12 imported cases, including 3 passengers on board a Cathay Pacific Airways flight from London. This triggered a 1-week suspension of flight CX252. Another 2 imported cases were teachers arriving from overseas. Both tested positive in late March overseas and have since recovered, but their nucleic acid test taken on the 12th day after their arrival in Hong Kong returned positive results. As their viral load was relatively low, both teachers are believed to be re-positive cases. With multiple flights being recently banned from landing in Hong Kong, the Center for Health Protection said it will look into how re-positive cases should be dealt with under the flight suspension mechanism. Meanwhile, 10 more students and 3 more teachers from 13 different schools tested positive for COVID. The authorities also amended the number of students and teachers involved in confirmed cases announced yesterday.
Yesterday, I reported that in school, there were 19 cases affecting 19 schools. I need to give you an update. 1 more student from one of the schools. So that is 2 children in the same family are studying in the same school. So we counted one less. So in total, there should be 20 positive cases from 19 schools.
Meanwhile, the government's free door-to-door home vaccination service began today, targeting senior citizens aged 70 or above with mobility issues. The outreach teams only offer Sinovac jabs. Those who took the jab were instantly given their vaccination certificate. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Zhang Zhongde, a top Chinese medicine practitioner, said the use of traditional Chinese medicine has sped up the recovery of some elderly COVID patients. Zhang, who led a Chinese medicine team, arrived in Hong Kong and helped combat the pandemic around a month ago. He said some patients' symptoms, such as coughing and shortness of breath, got alleviated after taking traditional Chinese medicine. Zhang said the 2 antiviral drugs, molnupiravir and Paxlovid, will not be used if the patients are undergoing Chinese medicine treatment. He suggested the Hong Kong government introduce the use of traditional Chinese medicine at an early stage so it can prevent COVID patients from developing severe symptoms.
Mainland authorities today reported more than 17,000 locally acquired COVID infections. Most of them are in Shanghai.
Beijing announced it will test most of its population through 3 rounds of PCR tests after 33 new infections were recorded in the capital city. Workers barricaded neighborhoods that were earlier classified as controlled zones. Large gatherings were cancelled and Chaoyang Sports Center was immediately shut down. Yonghe Temple also announced all religious activities will be suspended starting Wednesday. Most of the cases reported in Beijing on Monday emerged in Chaoyang district, where regular PCR tests have been carried out. But the municipal government announced late last night that 3 rounds of PCR tests will be conducted from Tuesday to Saturday in 11 other districts, covering 90% of the city's population. Residents will not be allowed to leave their homes before the test results are out. Authorities also encouraged companies to allow staff members to work from home. Edmund, a Hong Konger living in Beijing, said there are not that many cases in Beijing. He is confident the authorities can learn from Shanghai's experience and do a better job in dealing with the epidemic. Meanwhile, Shanghai reported 16,980 new cases of COVID-19, with infections dipping for the 3rd day in a row. Sun Xiaodong of the Municipal Center for Disease Control and Prevention explained the city's caseload remains at a high level due to the dense population of some older districts. 52 more COVID patients died, including a 33-year-old who had received 2 COVID jabs. The Municipal Health Commission said this wave of the epidemic has claimed 190 lives, with most of the victims aged 70 or above. With heavy rain in this city, nucleic acid tests were conducted only in restricted and controlled zones. Residents in prevention zones took antigen tests instead. On the other side of the Taiwan Strait, some 6,295 COVID cases were recorded, marking another daily record high. About a third of the cases in Taiwan were detected in New Taipei City, and 1,000 others were reported each in Taipei and Taoyuan.
Australia's opposition party has promised to establish a Pacific Defence School to train neighbouring armies. The school is among several measures the Labour Party has promised to increase Australia's engagement in the region if they win elections on May 21st.
Today we're announcing investment with establishing a new defence training college. This will provide opportunities for us to train Pacific Island country personnel. There already exists some level of training for commissioned officers, but this will be providing requisite training for defence personnel below the commissioner officer level, and I think it will provide great opportunities for us to deepen our ties with our friends in the Pacific.
The announcement comes as Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison struggles to close the gap with the main opposition ahead of the election. National security has dominated the election campaign after China last week struck a security deal with the Solomon Islands. Australia and the United States fear the deal could result in a Chinese naval presence less than 2,000 kilometers from the northeast Australian coast. Beijing insists the pact will only help the Solomon Islands maintain social order and cope with natural disasters and humanitarian relief. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said on Monday the so-called Chinese military base in the Solomon Islands is complete disinformation fabricated by people with ulterior motives. Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday accused Western countries of trying to destroy Russia. Speaking to Russia's top prosecutors, Putin claimed the West is inciting Ukraine to plan attacks on Russian journalists. Putin said the Federal Security Service prevented a murder attempt on Russian TV journalist Vladimir Soloyev. His guests often denigrate Ukraine and justify Moscow's actions there. Russian investigators say the plot was organized by Ukraine's State Security Service. Ukraine denies the allegations, calling them fantasies cooked up by Moscow. Putin demanded prosecutors take a tough line with what he cast as plots hatched by foreign spies to divide the country and discredit its armed forces.
The UN Secretary General says his top priority is to minimize human suffering in Ukraine when he meets with Russian President Vladimir Putin today in Moscow. Western countries have said they have little hope of a breakthrough.
Meanwhile, Russia's top diplomat says NATO risks starting a nuclear war by arming Ukraine in a proxy battle against Russia.
On Russian state television, ramped up rhetoric from the Russian foreign minister when asked about the importance of avoiding World War III. Sergei Lavrov said NATO has effectively entered the war with Russia by arming proxies.
И это наша принципиальная позиция.
Lavrov said the risks are now considerable and must not be underestimated. Ukrainian Foreign Ministry Dmytro Kuleba said Russia's scaremongering is a sign of weakness. He said Russia has lost hope of scaring the world from supporting Ukraine, meaning Moscow senses defeat. Britain also played down the Russian threat. The UK Defence Minister today rejected Russian claims that NATO is somehow provoking Russia by arming Ukraine, calling it utter nonsense.
Sergei Lavrov might also reflect that the reason that there is a war in Ukraine right now is because Russia rolled over the borders of a sovereign country and started to invade their territory.
The U.S. Secretary of Defense, meanwhile, was in Germany convening a meeting of more than 40 countries to discuss arming Ukraine in its fight against Russia's military assault in the east. Lloyd Austin denounced Russia's invasion as indefensible and expressed confidence that Ukraine can prevail against Russia in the two-month-old conflict.
Russia is waging a war of choice to indulge the ambitions of one man. Ukraine is fighting a war of necessity to defend its democracy, its sovereignty, and its citizens.
Ukraine's general staff said today that Russia's offensive continues in the east, with Russian forces taking the city of Crimea after days of street fighting. Russia has also been striking targets in other parts of Ukraine with missiles and airstrikes. The Russian Defense Ministry said it had destroyed 6 facilities powering railways used to deliver foreign weapons to Ukrainian forces.
Still to come on tonight's news, Elon Musk clinches a deal to buy Twitter. And a man jailed for spitting on the metal gates of 2 residential units at Kwaichung Estate during the January lockdown.
Tesla owner Elon Musk has clinched a deal to buy Twitter for $44 billion.
The transaction will shift control of the social media platform populated by millions of users and world leaders into the hands of the world's richest man. Ellen Booknier reports.
Twitter's board at first enacted an anti-takeover measure known as a poison pill that would have made the takeover prohibitively expensive. But when Musk outlined the financial commitments he lined up to back his offer and no other bidders emerged, the board opened negotiations with him. Musk says Twitter needs to be transformed into a private company in order to build trust with users and do better at serving up what he calls the social imperative of free speech. House Republicans reacted with a tweet saying it's a great week to free @real Donald Trump. Twitter banned Trump's account due to the risk of further violence following the January 6, 2021 storming of the U.S. Capitol. Some analysts caution against too much freedom of speech.
And if he buys Twitter without any conditions, what's going to happen is Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, other extremists, not just in the United States, but in the world, will have their accounts restored. And the rules that prevented them from doing certain kinds of extremism and disinformation on Twitter's platform will be eliminated so that they'll have free reign. It's a massive victory for authoritarian forces, for lies, for extremism, and for hate.
The White House wouldn't directly comment on the acquisition, but voiced concern about social media in general.
The President has long talked about his concerns about the power of social media platforms, including Twitter and others, to spread misinformation, disinformation, the need for these platforms to be held accountable.
Critics also note that Musk himself regularly blocks social media users who have criticized him or his company, and has used the platform to bully reporters who have written critical articles about him or his company. Alan Buknia, TVB News.
A New York judge has held former U.S. President Donald Trump in contempt of court and ordered him to pay $10,000 a day for failing to adequately respond to a subpoena issued by the state's attorney general. Trump lost a bid to quash the subpoena, then failed to produce all the documents by a March 31st deadline. The judge in the case referred to repeated failures to hand over material and said it was not clear Trump had conducted a complete search for the documents. New York Attorney General Letitia James, a Democrat, has been conducting a lengthy investigation into the Trump Organization. It centers around what she claims is a clear pattern of misleading banks and tax authorities about the value of his properties. Trump has called it a politically motivated witch hunt.
Sources say Chief Executive hopeful John Lee will meet with members of the Election Committee in a forum to be held next week. And this Saturday night, Lee will attend a forum organized by 7 local electronic media outlets. According to sources, Lee, the sole candidate for the 6th chief executive election, will announce his election manifesto in the coming days. For Saturday's session, Lee will respond to media and public inquiries. Because of the epidemic, questions from members of the public that were randomly chosen will be pre-recorded. The forum, to be held at TVB City, will be broadcast live from 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. this Saturday. That's the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Good night.